In 1969, the United States achieved a remarkable feat by sending astronauts to the moon. This historic event marked their victory in the space race against Russia. But is that really the whole story? What if I told you there's a shadow of doubt cast upon this monumental achievement? That's right, we're about to unfold the question that has kept conspiracy theorists buzzing for decades. Was the NASA moon landing in 1969 real, or was it an elaborate trickery? Renowned speaker Jordan Peterson has sparked a lot of doubt by sharing a series of interesting arguments that challenge the authenticity of the moon landing. Why were there no animal tests conducted before sending humans into space? How did the astronauts survive the harsh radiation of deep space? And why haven't we returned with manned missions since 1972? These intriguing questions raise doubts and beg for answers. But that's not all. We'll also dig deep into the questionable footage and images from the moon mission itself. Are they genuine or skillfully crafted illusions? Prepare yourself for an exploration of evidence, theories, and a quest for the truth. So, it's time to separate fact from fiction and unlock the astonishing revelations. Jordan Peterson, known for his rational thinking, once had doubts about the moon landing. He admitted being fully immersed in these theories for years, but his perspective has since shifted. Why would someone like Peterson question such a monumental event involving NASA, costing billions of dollars and televised for the world? Well, he presents some convincing reasons that are not easily dismissed. Let's start with his first point, which left his guest equally surprised. Peterson points out that out of the 7 attempts made by NASA to reach the moon, one mission, Apollo 13, didn't succeed as planned. This failure, Peterson notes, was the only time in human history a human being had ventured beyond 400 miles above the Earth's surface. In contrast, all the other missions, such as the space station and space shuttle missions, remained within Earth's orbit, relatively close to home. The distance traveled by the Apollo missions, approximately 260,000 miles to the moon and back, is vastly different from the relatively low orbits of other space missions. Peterson finds it peculiar that NASA has never attempted to send animals to the moon before risking human lives. If we reflect on history, we'll find that in 1957, a dog named Laika became the first Earthling to orbit our planet. This furry cosmonaut's journey paved the way for human space travel, as scientists back then weren't certain if humans could survive in space. Laika's sacrifice in the early days of space exploration helped scientists understand the effects of space travel on the human body. They needed to ensure astronauts' survival before embarking on manned missions. This is why animals were initially sent to space, to test the feasibility of human space travel. Over time, as space programs advanced, experiments expanded to study various aspects of human health affected by space travel. These animal tests were crucial stepping stones in preparing for future manned missions to Mars, or long-term moon habitation. In the animal kingdom of space travel, there were other notable pioneers as well. A chimpanzee named Ham safely returned to Earth after a brief trip to space, capturing the public's attention in 1961. Fruit flies were the first living beings to be launched into space, and they also made it back alive. NASA conducted flight tests with rhesus monkeys named Albert from 1948 to 1951. Among them, Albert II became the first primate to reach space, while Albert VI, also known as Yorick, was the only one to survive long enough for rescue. Unfortunately, Yorick passed away shortly after, likely due to the extreme heat and stress experienced during his space confinement. Additionally, during the space race of the 1950s, both the Soviet and American space programs sent various animals like mice, rats, dogs, monkeys, and rabbits into space. However, after humans successfully orbited the Earth in the early 1960s and landed on the moon in 1969, the focus shifted to studying a wider range of life forms in space. The scientists began sending jellyfish, tortoises, frog eggs, microorganisms, spiders, amoebas, and algae to understand how different types of life could survive and develop in space. But there are doubts surrounding the moon landings as well. Jordan Peterson raises the point that we have never sent any living beings beyond Earth's magnetic field and through the Van Allen radiation belts into deep space. There are concerns about solar flares and other dangers that could have instantly killed the astronauts. Moreover, we haven't attempted such a mission since 1972. The magnetosphere, the region of space influenced by Earth's magnetic field, plays a vital role in protecting our planet from harmful solar and cosmic radiation. The solar wind, a stream of charged particles from the sun, shapes the magnetosphere. It compresses the magnetosphere on one side and stretches it into a long tail on the other. The magnetopause marks the boundary between the magnetosphere and the solar wind, while the bow shock is the shock wave formed when the solar wind collides with the magnetosphere. NASA conducts various missions to study the magnetosphere and its effects on our space environment and the habitability of Earth. The Van Allen radiation belts, discovered in 1958 by James Van Allen using data from the Explorer 1 satellite, are two main belts encircling the Earth. The particles in these belts primarily come from the solar wind and can be emitted by cosmic rays in the Earth's atmosphere. These particles spiral around the magnetic field lines, bouncing between the Earth's poles. The intensity and shape of the belts can change depending on solar activity and the Earth's magnetic field. The high-energy particles in these belts pose a risk to satellites and spacecraft in their vicinity. Considering the technological advancements today, one might wonder why we haven't returned to the moon. The truth is, the technology for manned space travel to deep space and the moon has significantly improved. However, the lack of funding has hindered progress in this area. Funding is a major challenge for NASA's ambitious goal of sending astronauts back to the moon by 2024. The estimated budget for the fiscal year 2023 is a staggering $25.4 billion, including $7.5 billion for the Artemis program. Yet there is no guarantee that this budget will be approved by Congress. The moon mission competes with other NASA priorities and programs for limited funding and support, making it even more challenging. The moon mission requires new rockets, landers, spacesuits, and technologies. NASA plans to use the Space Launch System or SLS rocket and Orion capsule to launch astronauts to lunar orbit. They will then transfer to a gateway station and descend to the moon's surface using a human landing system or HLS vehicle. However, these developments have faced delays, cost overruns, legal disputes, and protests from rival companies. Additionally, the moon mission competes with Earth science research, climate change studies, Mars exploration, space station operations, and commercial crew and cargo programs for funding. Another hurdle is the lack of political consensus and stability surrounding the moon mission. Different administrations and Congresses have varying visions and goals for NASA's human spaceflight program. The lunar landing target was accelerated from 2028 to 2024 under the Trump administration, while the Biden administration has yet to commit to a specific date. The Biden administration emphasizes diversity, inclusion, international collaboration, and commercial partnerships in the Artemis program. Congress has also expressed its views on the moon mission, such as the need for a second HLS provider, extending the International Space Station's operation, and supporting a robotic moon rover. Furthermore, sending humans to the moon is risky and expensive. It involves substantial investment in life support systems, posing significant potential harm to human lives. In contrast, robots can accomplish many tasks without endangering lives or requiring costly life support systems. Hence, some argue that manned missions to the moon may not be worthwhile when robots can perform similar tasks more safely and at a lower cost. Moreover, sending robots to the moon instead of humans has several advantages. The space environment and lunar surface pose risks to humans, such as a lack of oxygen, water, food, shelter, and protection from radiation, micrometeorites, extreme temperatures, and dust. Physiologically and psychologically, humans are affected by weightlessness, isolation, and stress, which can impair their performance, health, and well-being, and increase the chances of accidents and fatalities. On the other hand, robots have no biological needs or limitations. They can operate in any environment, withstand higher radiation levels and extreme temperatures, and work for extended periods without fatigue or boredom. Moreover, humans in space and on the moon are expensive to send and support. They require large and complex infrastructure like rockets, capsules, landers, habitats, spacesuits, and vehicles for safe transportation. Continuous communication, monitoring, and resupply from Earth also add to the cost. Robots, on the contrary, are more cost-effective and easier to deploy and operate in space and the moon. They can be launched using smaller and less expensive rockets, consume less fuel and power, and carry more scientific instruments than humans. They don't need constant communication or resupply from Earth. Additionally, the scientific capabilities and objectives of humans on the moon are limited. They can only explore a small area near their landing site, collect a limited number of samples, conduct a few experiments, and stay for a limited time. They also face ethical and legal challenges regarding the preservation and unfair treatment of the lunar environment and resources. Robots, however, can explore much larger areas, collect more diverse and abundant samples, conduct sophisticated and long-term experiments, and stay on the lunar surface indefinitely. They don't raise ethical or legal concerns about the lunar environment or resources. Now, let's move on to an interesting topic raised by Peterson. He suggests that some footage of the moon mission might not be entirely genuine. For instance, there are doubts about a photo of Michael Collins during Gemini 15, which was presented as a spacewalk but was actually taken during a test run with a blacked-out background to make it look like he was in space. Another issue is the moon rock gifted to a Dutch prime minister, which turned out to be petrified wood instead of an actual moon rock. While NASA distributed genuine moon rocks to various countries, some small rocks' whereabouts remain unknown. Although genuine moon rocks are mineralogically worthless, black market collectors can pay substantial sums for them. NASA has always been a subject of speculation and mystery. Some intriguing footage shows astronauts moving around on the moon's surface. If you haven't seen it yet, it's quite amusing to watch them stumble around, which raises questions about the physics of the moonwalk. Some people even speculate that the astronauts were in a warehouse with blacked-out walls, which could explain why there are no stars in the photos. They suggest that the astronauts were supported by ropes or strings, as their stumbling movements seem to indicate that they are balancing on a line around their waist and being pulled up from behind when they fall. The moon's gravity, which is 1/6 of the Earth's, could also be a factor. Our brains simply can't comprehend how humans would behave in such an environment. But regardless of these theories, one thing is certain: the moon landing has its fair share of strange elements that make you wonder if it happened the way NASA claims. Another interesting aspect is Operation Paperclip. So, what was Operation Paperclip? In 1945, the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency was assigned the task of locating German scientists, doctors, and engineers crucial to Hitler's weapons programs. Concerns over potential atomic, chemical, and biological weapons led to Operation Paperclip, a joint effort by the Allies, including the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, to recruit these experts. Prominent among them was Wernher von Braun, who played a pivotal role in developing US ballistic missiles and became a key figure in NASA. Another scientist, Hubertus Struckhold, was associated with inhumane medical experiments. Despite their past involvement, these scientists were not held accountable, and Operation Paperclip remained secretive during the Cold War. Additionally, NASA is undertaking the Artemis mission, with plans to send astronauts to the moon. The Artemis II mission in 2024 will test life support systems, while Artemis III aims to land the first woman and person of color on the moon. The construction of the Lunar Outpost Gateway will support future lunar and Mars missions, involving collaboration with commercial and international partners. SpaceX's role is to provide a reusable human landing system, HLS, based on their Starship vehicle, enabling regular crew transportation and supporting future Mars endeavors. So, as we reach the end of this captivating journey, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of history and mystery. The moon landing of 1969, a triumph that defined an era and shaped the course of human exploration, is now shrouded in doubt and controversy. Could there be a hidden truth behind these peculiarities? Will this endeavor finally lay to rest the doubts and uncertainties surrounding the moon landing of 1969?
It is often said that social media is driving us out of our minds, individually and collectively. Is this true? And if so, how and why? Twitter deemed it necessary to suspend my access to that platform.
Jordan Peterson's voice echoes with disbelief as he confronts the treacherous realm of Twitter, where the pillars of free speech crumble beneath the weight of censorship and ideological bias.
In response to the decision of an actor named Ellen Elliott Page.
With furrowed brow and clenched fists, Jordan Peterson exposes the betrayal that unfolds on Twitter's digital stage, where once open dialogue has been suffocated by the stifling grip of political correctness.
The reason I'm doing that rather than speaking extemporaneously is because now and then, if I'm pushing myself to the limits of my conceptual ability, then I have to choose my words with the undue care that writing allows. And I suppose that has the disadvantage that's associated with reading something rather than speaking off the cuff.
Like a solitary figure standing against an oppressive regime, Jordan Peterson laments the loss of intellectual diversity on Twitter, as dissenting voices are silenced and unpopular opinions are banished to the shadows.
employing this awkward and impossible naming style because it is now apparently mandatory, and am probably doing it wrong nonetheless, as you're doing it wrong is the whole point of what has been made mandatory. But also, I'm trying to make a point.
With righteous indignation, Jordan Peterson unveils the disturbing truth. Twitter, once hailed as a platform for open conversation, has become a breeding ground for ideological tyranny, where thought crimes are punished and conformity is enforced.
The wise folks at Twitter deemed it necessary to suspend my access to that platform, despite the fact that I had several million followers, despite the fact that I had used the platform in good faith, despite the fact that I had put in the years of time and effort.
Amidst the cacophony of voices on Twitter, Jordan Peterson's cry resonates with the weight of shattered ideals as he confronts the dark reality that this once promising platform has become a battleground for suppression and the erosion of free expression.
It is often said that social media is driving us out of our minds, individually and collectively. Is this true? And if so, how and why? The eminent social psychologist Jonathan Haidt recently wrote a hard-hitting article showing that use of certain forms of social media.
With a heavy heart, Jordan Peterson confronts the chilling reality that Twitter, once a symbol of freedom and connectivity, has morphed into a weapon of ideological warfare, leaving truth and reason trampled beneath the boots of cancel culture.
Reason for the suspension? It's not exactly clear, because very little is exactly clear, Mr. Agrawal, with regard to your social media network, apart from the fact that you allow an awful lot of misbehavior.
Jordan Peterson's voice trembles with a mix of disbelief and righteous anger as he confronts the stark betrayal perpetrated by Twitter's arbitrary and opaque enforcement policies, where dissenting opinions are labeled as hate speech and silenced with impunity.
Directly and causally associated with higher rates of depression and depression-related symptoms since the early to mid-2010s. I had been thinking along broadly similar lines, particularly with regard to Twitter and how its incentives are structured compared to those that characterize healthy human interactions. The extent of its harmful pathology has recently been brought home to me as a consequence of those deliberations. A thought experiment. Imagine, for example, that you learned a particular pattern of communication in your family, one that, when used on others, triggered a passive or even outright aggressive resistance. By definition, the unusual method of communication you had been taught, one that did not generalize well to the broader social environment, would characterize you, at least as far as society is concerned, as insane. Now, let's ask, how does Twitter, like that family, differ from the real world in how it requires us to communicate with each other? How does it make us, too, insane? The first way is in the manner in which it bypasses the traditional means for measuring the quality of communication. In the real world, high-volume communication is extremely costly, requiring both hard-to-establish credibility. Why otherwise would large numbers of people want to read or listen to you? And access to the wealth necessary for such communication, either directly through personal accumulation or by proxy, such as a contractual arrangement with a publishing house. Essentially being banned from Twitter as a consequence. I say banned, although technically I have been suspended. But the suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that. And hopefully it will not come to that, although who the hell knows in these increasingly strange days. What was it that I said that caused such a fuss? And that fuss is just beginning. And even more importantly and complexly, what exactly was it that I said that resulted in the ban? Here's the tweet in question. Remember when pride was a sin? And Ellen Page just had her moved by a position. Then a link to a story that detailed out happenings. The response from Twitter, quote, violating our rules against hateful conduct. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease. By clicking delete, you acknowledge that your tweet violated the Twitter rules. Delete. If you think we've made a mistake, submit an appeal to us. Please note that should you do so, your account will remain locked while we review your appeal.
Casts these limitations asunder. The consequence of this demolition of potentially vital regulation is multiplied by the fact that Twitter provides universal access to each of its users' hard-won personal networks. The second way is how anyone, regardless of competence or social status, can comment to anyone else's entire network of followers merely by commenting on something the latter posted. That same commenter therefore can access all those who have chosen to follow not them, but the target of their, say, insult and derision, without having demonstrated any of the competence necessary to have attracted such attention on their own. This democratization of communication enables a parasitism completely divorced from competence. It massively inflates noise relative to signal, bypassing all the screening mechanisms that have been so painstakingly developed to shield us from incessant racket in the real world. The third way Twitter breaks the norms of standard human interaction is the zero cost and even potential benefit it imposes on those who engage in flagrant ethical misconduct. It facilitates the implied moral elevation that accrues to the accuser, who adopts the position of virtuous judge merely by formulating an accusation, however vague, ill-founded, and scurrilous. In the same vein, there is no cost for insults, ad hominem attacks, and provocative statements, incitement, in other words.
Take this apart. First, it is clearly the case that I did not promote violence against or threaten anyone with my missive. So that leaves the arguably lesser sin of harass. Let's assume, since I wasn't informed, that that was the... And further, harassment on the basis of so-called gender identity, since Twitter did not do me the favor of actually specifying my crime. And there are many possibilities on that front. We unfortunately have to guess at why this has occurred, and that's actually a big problem in and of itself, and also indicative of the utter carelessness of the Twitter organization with regard to the propriety of its own censorial actions. I should at least know exactly what I did wrong if I am required to acknowledge that my tweet violated the Twitter rules. What rules, you sons of... Exactly. Precisely. Because such things matter when the accusations start flying. So what did I say that might constitute harassment? Well, many things, hypothetically. Let's begin with, remember when pride was a sin? Although that is merely a factual statement, because under the old rules, applicable even a decade ago, pride was a sin and had been recognized as perhaps the cardinal sin for thousands of years previously. It still might be regarded as unacceptable to the woke authoritarian moralists who now insist, for example, that we celebrate Pride Month, not hour or day or week, but month, and who have literally called it Pride Month instead of LGBT plus month or whatever else.
People can hide behind their anonymity as well and act, if possible, even more brazenly. Too often, therefore, the medium stimulates a reactive rage, as it denies even to competent users two of the main privileges traditionally granted to them: the presumption of innocence and the right and ability to engage in effective self-defense. The mob can say anything at all about you or your thoughts online, despite your hard-earned reputation, and there is nothing you can do about it. Any member of what can far too easily become a mob can level any accusation, no matter how slanderous, against anyone at all, for any reason, and there is little or nothing that the target can do in response. Perhaps most worrisome of all is the fact that this incited rage bleeds over into the real world. All the impotent anger generated is externalized away from the social network and dispersed. Thus, the ambient emotional temperature of general society is raised, degree by degree, to the boiling point. Malignant narcissism. We know this instinctively, but it would be easy to test. An ambitious PhD student, in case one's listening, could expose one group to Twitter for half an hour, another randomly established to another social media network, and a third, if desired, to a reading task. All study participants could then be assigned, say, a competitive aggression research task to determine if Twitter exposure heightens the proclivity to respond in kind with punishment to provocation.
Don't regard pride as a virtue. It has been classically regarded as a sin. I don't see that orientation or desire of any sort is something to celebrate or to take pride in. And so what I said was merely a fact. Now, it's possible that I hurt someone's feelings because I pointed out that pride goes before, for example, a fall, but I don't care about that. Would do it again, and also consider it my duty to warn those who are about to fall into a pit that the path they are on leads suddenly downhill. But that was probably not the reason that I was banned from Twitter, although, as I said, I am in the position of having to guess. Next phrase to interrogate. And Ellen Page. Now, why did I stop there? Because in all likelihood, it was this seemingly innocuous phrase, including the name of a well-known actress, there I'm in trouble again, that likely resulted in my ban. I committed the fatal crime of what has come to be known in the appalling sensorial terminology of the insane activists as naming, which is the act of referring to someone who has transitioned, another hated piece of jargon and slogan, by the name and by the inference, the gender, really the that everyone knew them by previously, and in the case of Ellen/Elliot, that millions of people recognized and knew. So I should have either called him, her, they, Elliot, instead of Ellen, although as we will discover, that would have made it impossible for me to say what I wanted to and need to say in the remaining phrases. Not that such a problem would bother those who are objecting to my speech in the first place. That Twitter's reward structure, even more than Facebook's, incentivizes malignant narcissism. It enables and benefits free riding and prioritizes psychopathic motivation. And it garners disproportionate attention in doing so, capitalizing on the attractiveness of outrageous behavior, while externalizing all the associated and inevitable costs to the innocent, broader society. This is the psychological equivalent of the tragedy of the commons, the psychological equivalent to pollution of the air we all breathe. I recently spoke about all this to the author of the article I mentioned previously, psychologist Jonathan Haidt, and on the same email string to Steven Pinker, the eminent cognitive psychologist. How did my psychologist colleagues react? Haidt noted that Twitter indeed cuts the link between, quote, competence or value creation and prestige/reward.